Good to see you this morning. Thanks for coming. We're going to begin a short series that we're choosing to call Great Lights the Way. Kind of an odd title, I get it. But we're going to talk about, at least this week, what does it mean to be great? I mean, think about if you were to look in our culture, and if you were looking down from outer space and looking at how we behaved and the people that we looked up to, put on a pedestal, viewed as role models, who do you think, if you were just a casual observer, what kind of person do you think we would define as great? If you're looking down and you said, these people really think a lot of this person. Think about maybe a celebrity, maybe your favorite celebrity, your favorite actor or actress of all time. They're good at acting, but does that make them great? Maybe it's your favorite musical artist. They're great at singing or playing an instrument. We put them on that pedestal. We tend to value their opinion over others. Why do you think that would be? Or maybe it's more that great military leader, the Pattons of the world, those leaders that are big, bold, brash. They command authority simply by the power of their personality. Maybe those are the types of people that we think of as great. Or maybe it's the business leader that leads by power of charisma. People are just drawn to this person. Maybe that's what we consider to be great. And it wasn't that different in Jesus' day. And we're going to look at a passage today where Jesus talks about what it means to be great. Because I think exactly the same things, the same types of people that were looked up to in Jesus' day, is exactly the same kind of people that we look up to today. And in the context of the passage that we're about to read, this is Jesus toward the end of his ministry, and things are about to get really serious. And there's some questions that are asked, and Jesus then uses that as an opportunity to launch into a lesson on what it means to be great. Because you've heard me say before that what is true, what is real in the world today is often camouflaged. What we perceive as absolutely real and true is not true at all. My basis for that is, and you've heard me say it before, Jesus before Pilate, the day of his crucifixion, he tells Pilate, "For this reason I was born. For this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth, to tell you what is real. I came to show you what's real, what's true, because it's hidden. What you believe to be true is not true at all. So I'm going to show you what's true, because the truth has to be defended. And that's why Jesus came." So let's get into this. This is in Mark chapter 10. We're going to read through this, and we're going to talk about it. If you want to yell out a comment today, that's going to be absolutely okay in the lesson today. All right, I'll give you a chance to do that. They were on their way up to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way. The disciples were astonished, and while those who followed were afraid. This is referring to something that had previously happened. And he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him, what was going to happen to Jesus. Things had been great up until this point. this point, if you were one of the 12 disciples, you were a really popular person. Because the closer you were to Jesus, the more popular you were. You see, Jesus healed grandma. Jesus brought sight to the blind. He made the crippled walk. People were coming in droves just to be close to him. He was very, very popular. We're going up to Jerusalem, he said, Jesus said, and the Son of Man, referring to himself, will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. So put yourself in this moment. Think about if you're one of the 12 disciples. This is a very somber and serious moment. This is Jesus pouring out his heart because he knows things are about to go bad and that his time on earth with them is rapidly coming to a close. So he wants to warn them, get them prepared for what's about to happen. This is kind of like, I don't have children, but imagine if you've got a child that's about to get married or go off to college and leave the home, and you're trying to depart your final bit of wisdom before they leave your household. It's a very serious, serious time, a very serious moment. And I think the disciples kind of sense this, that what they've been experiencing is about to come to a culmination. But it's going to come to a culmination in a way that they really don't anticipate. Because, they're thinking, okay, this thing is going to end. Jesus is going to finally free the Jews from Rome. Jesus, after he rises in these 3 days, he's going to become king. And our world is going to be wonderful. That's their mindset. Then James and John, sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus, said, "Teacher, we want to ask you to do for us whatever we ask." Jesus had just pouring out his heart. And it's like, you're having this very serious conversation with your kids, and they say, "Okay, can I go upstairs now?" That's the kind of feeling that I have here. But James and John, they sense that it's about to change. They sense that they've got to be the first mover or they may be left out. Because they know Jesus will become king. And he will, just not when they think he will. So Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they replied, "Let one of us sit on your right hand and the other on your left in your glory." See, they knew that they could never be the point guy. That's Jesus' role. He is the top leader, whatever you want to call him. But maybe they could be right under Jesus. And they would have all of this power and control and authority from everything down below. So they were like the kids when you're running to get into your car and they say, "I got shotgun." They wanted that first mover advantage. So they asked Jesus, "We want to sit on your right hand and your left." And then Jesus went on to tell them, "You really don't know what you're asking for. I can't give you that." But Jesus recognized their mindset was they wanted power and authority in the traditional sense. They wanted to be great in their minds, in the way that they saw greatness, the way we described earlier. When the 10 heard this, they became indignant with James and John. Now, I don't believe they came indignant because they thought that James and John were not really thinking about Jesus. I think they became indignant because they were afraid they were going to be left out. If James and John got the number 2 and number 3 positions, then they were going to be under James and John. And they didn't want that to happen. See, these guys were arguing over who gets to be next to Jesus when Jesus becomes king. They know they can't be at the top, but they can be just under the top. So then Jesus takes this opportunity because he knows that their thinking is wrong. Their thinking is wrong in what it means to be great. Their thinking is wrong in terms of what it means to have authority and power and influence. So he uses this as an opportunity to launch into a teaching on what it really means to be great. Not what we perceive to be great, but what it really means to be great. Verse 42. So Jesus called them together. You know what those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. He's saying, you know how it is. You know how it works. You know this person in charge is really in charge. He tells everybody else what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And I'm thinking the disciples say, yeah, that's exactly the way it is. That's why we want to be on your right hand and on your left. Well, if we take this to the modern context, we can think about something that I'm pretty familiar with. Think about the corporate organizational chart. So we're going to create this fictional character. Let's call him Ulysses. Ulysses for short, or U for short. And U is he's working in a fairly large corporation. He's a pretty good person. Let's just pretend he's a technology person, for lack of anything else. And U is grown. He's decent at what he does. And one day, U's boss decides to retire. And U gets the tap on the shoulder asking if he would take responsibility for the team once the boss retires. So U thinks about this, and U says, this group I think it's called data services or something like that. He says, manager, data services. I like the sound of that. I mean, you can be a boss. I mean, how hard can it really be? I mean, you was selected for this job for good reason. I mean, you was good at what he did. How hard could it really be to be a boss? So you takes the first step up the corporate ladder. And once you has responsibility for a team, he's got to confront some really sobering facts. The fact that these people now depend on him for direction. You is going to have a dramatic impact on their lives, not just professionally, but personally. First thing you've got to do is confront his ego. And you know what? We all have one. Never underestimate the power of the human ego to do some really bad things. So you have to confront his ego. I mean, you was selected for this job for a good reason. He deserved it. He was the best on the team. So he's promoted. Now, you has got a team. You has got a team that is there to do whatever he asked them to do, whenever he asked them to do it. And if he's so inclined, he can even tell them how to do it. And they got to do it. So you is now a boss. And you know how it works. You've got all these little U's under the big U. They're all there for you. You is the head of the team. If you wants to get the work done faster, all he's got to do is say, do it faster. If you see something that needs to be done, all he's got to do is say, go do this. Isn't that how it works? I mean, I'm exaggerating just a little bit. Right? But this is the model. This is what This is where the mind of the disciples went. As Jesus was going through this teaching, he says, you know how it works. You know how the business leaders use their team to do their own bidding, to make themselves look better. You know how it works. You know how the political leader uses his power and influence to get wealthy. And I'm thinking, the disciples are thinking, yeah, Jesus, I don't know where you're going with this, but we know this already. That's why we want to be number 2 and number 3. We know we can't be number 1. That's you. But the closer we are to number 1, we're going to have great power and great influence when you become king. Yeah, we want to lord over. We don't want to be lorded over. We know how it works. Then Jesus, in very typical Jesus fashion, comes in and he lays it out and says, not so with you. You know how the business leaders have teams that do their bidding? Not that way with you. See, Jesus knew that each of these people would have great power and authority. And he was saying, this is how you become great. This is how you use power and authority the right way. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you, there's our word, must be your servant. And I can imagine the air goes out of the room because this is not what they envisioned happening. So how does a person in power and authority be a servant? I mean, isn't being in power and authority the exact opposite of being a boss? Jesus said it's not so with you. You know how the political leaders take advantage of the people to get rich. Not going to be that way with you. You know how a husband lords over his wife and children to do what he wants them to do. Not going to be that way with you. I'm going to tell you what it really means to be great. What it really means to be great. And if you're a Jesus follower, this is not an optional thing. It's not something that you can choose to do. You can say, well, I'm not in a position of power or authority. Everyone has influence over someone, whether it's in your family, whether it's in some volunteer area where you work, maybe it's in your church setting, maybe it's in your job, maybe you are a boss, maybe you lead a department, a division, maybe you lead the entire company. But everyone is in a position of influence and leadership. And Jesus is saying, this is how you lead. This is how you become great. You've got to be servant of all. And you know, I've studied this quite extensively and over my lifetime, frankly. And you can read this where Jesus says, yeah, you got to be servant of all. And you know, it's intuitive to me that this is the right thing for people. I mean, who doesn't want to work for a boss that's there for them, right? Who doesn't want to do that? I mean, who doesn't want to work in an organization where the leader, the person has the most power and influence, is not in it for themselves, but in it for their team. That's in it for their organization. That they'll sacrifice their own well-being for the needs of the team. I mean, that is absolutely intuitive, I think, to most of us, that is the right people thing to do. And I remember thinking, that might work in a church setting. That might even work in a broader volunteer setting. But there's no way that's going to work where it really counts in the business world. No way. I mean, the leader can't be up there standing at the door saying, you first, you first, you first, because you're never going to get anything done. That's what I thought until the year 2001. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again really, really quickly. I read this book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And in this book, he references what he defines as level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership was the ultimate level of leadership. And Jim did a data-based study. That's the reason I read the book. I am a data-based person. And he studied all of the companies in the Fortune 500. And he had some very extensive criteria on what he called companies that went from good to great. And he defined great in summary as those companies that moved, that delivered superior results to their stakeholders over a 15-year period. And each company that met that criteria, and there were very few that met that criteria, they would have comparison companies that were in the same industry that didn't make that move. And he was studying what were the differences in those two companies. And then he told his team, he said, when you look at this, I want you to discount the role of the chief executive, the top point leader. But he couldn't. His team kept pushing back and said, there's something about these leaders that we can't ignore. And the data just kept screaming at the researchers, and that he ended up looking at the characteristics. And the characteristics that led 100%, not most, but 100% of the companies that went from good to great were led by what is called a level 5 leader. And I want to summarize the story because I could talk about this for a long time. But he said, first of all, you need to understand, this would be Jim Collins. This is not what I'm telling you that I believe great leaders should do. No. What I'm telling you is this is what the data shows great leaders do. And he said, I went into this and I thought, the number one characteristic of top level leaders has got to be charisma. Those leaders that lead with a overwhelming power to attract people, to attract good people that will then execute their vision. And that's how they would make the move to greatness. I think that's a common misconception. But he said, here's what the data shows. The number one characteristic of top leaders is humility. Humility. To which Jesus would say, 2,000 years ago, yeah, I told you. So, while it's the right people thing to do, it is also the right way to get results. So when Jesus said, I came to show you what is true, this is a great example of that. It's not charisma and arrogance that makes a person great. It's humility. Recognizing that you're here to serve other people. Even if you are the boss in your family, the boss in your corporation, the boss in a volunteer organization, you're here to serve. You're here to serve. And one last story, one of the characteristics of the level 5 leader is, it's called the mirror and the window. So it goes something like this. When something within an organization goes badly, things just didn't go the way it was anticipated, you didn't deliver the results that you needed, things have failed. The level 5 leader, the servant leader, looks at the window as a mirror and takes responsibility himself. It's my fault that we didn't succeed. On the other hand, when things go extremely well, maybe better than expected, the servant leader treats that same looking glass as a window to attribute success not to themselves, but to the people in the organization. That's what it means to be a servant leader. That's what it means to put yourself below the team, below the people in your family, below the organization that you volunteer for. We are all here to serve one another, regardless of our position in life. We are here to serve one another. So, I got a clip here that I want to show you that I think demonstrates this principle a little bit. It's from one of my favorite movies of all time, Apollo 13. Some of you are familiar with the story. For those who are not, let me just summarize it really quickly. So Apollo 13 was launched in 1970. It was the second mission to the moon. I think second mission to the moon. And they had this explosion on their way to the moon that then it became about how do we get these astronauts home safely. We forget about the moon, we got to get them home safely. And what I want to show you is a clip that has a guy that's playing Gene Kranz, who was the mission control leader, that I think demonstrates some of the characteristics of what I would call a servant leader. Yes, he was demanding. Yes, he was focused on the mission at hand, but just look at how he interacts with his team. And I want you to take special notice. They go through a very quick debate on what is the right course of action. Notice whose advice he chooses to take.
Okay, people, listen up. I want you all to forget the flight plan. From this moment on, we are improvising a new mission.
Sorry,
We'll get you to look at that.
I got the bulb around here.
How do we get our people home? They are here. We turn them around, straight back,
Yes.
direct abort.
No, sir. We get them on a free return trajectory. It's the option with the fewest question marks for safety.
I agree with Jerry. Use the moon's gravity, slingshot them around.
No, the LEM will not support 3 guys for that amount of time.
Barely holds.
I mean, we've got to do a direct abort. We do an about face, we bring the guys right home right now.
Get them back soon, absolutely.
We don't even know if the Odyssey's engine's even working, and if there's been serious damage to this spacecraft.
They blow up and they die.
That is not the argument. We're talking about time, not whether or not these guys...
Come on, I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you.
Okay, hold it. Let's hold it down. So you're telling me you can only give our guys 45 hours? That brings them to about there. Gentlemen, that's not acceptable.
Gene, we gotta talk about power here. Whoa, guys! Power is everything. Power is everything. What do you mean? Without it, they don't talk to us, they don't correct their trajectory, they don't turn the heat shield around. We gotta turn everything off. Now. They're not gonna make it to re-entry.
What do you mean, everything?
With everything on, the LEM draws 60 amps. At that rate, in 16 hours, the batteries are dead, not 45. And so's the crew. We gotta get them down to 12 amps.
How many? You can't run a vacuum cleaner on 12 amps, John.
We gotta turn off. We have to turn off the radars, cabin heater, instrument displays, the guidance computer, the whole smack.
Whoa, guidance computer. What if they need to do another burn? Gene, they won't even know which way they're pointed.
The more time we talk down here, the more juice they waste up there. I've been looking at the data for the past hour.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
Okay, John. The minute we finish the burn, we'll power down the LEM.
All right.
Really cool thing. So most of the time we don't think of someone that is that strong a personality being a servant leader, do we? But I think he modeled it. I mean, he had created an environment where people could openly disagree with one another, where they could debate. They could have different opinions, even if it was different than the boss. And you notice the youngest, least experienced person in the room was who he chose to listen to, because he knew he was right. That's what it means to be a servant leader. You free people to do their best. You unlock the creativity and the innovation of the people around you. Now, you say, I'm not a leader. Yes, you are. If you're part of a family, you're a leader. And when you put yourself below the needs of the family, even if you are the leader in your household, you're expected to be a servant leader, to serve your spouse, to serve your children. Whew, this is hard. This is hard. To do this, you got to check your ego at the door. I mean, how many of us would say that we are a leader worth following? We're not. We're flawed people. Just happen to be in a different position than others. And you know, most of you know I am a leader in my secular job. I have 550 direct reports. No, 550 people in my organization, 9 direct reports. And as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, I feel compelled to get this right. And I don't always. But I want to get this right. And I hope you do too. So how do we get this right? How do we start taking, regardless of your position in life, how do you start down this road? And I'm going to give you one thing that you can do this week, regardless of your position. Just start asking this question. What can I do to help you? What can I do to help? Whether you're the boss or you're the lowest person on the totem pole, what can I do to help? See, what this question is saying is, how do I align myself to you? How do I help you be successful? How do I help you accomplish your mission? How do I loan my power and my authority, however big or little it happens to be, to you? For you, not for me. What can I do to help? So I think this is why the way Jesus is defining what does it mean to be great. I mean, I hope all of you aspire to do great things. I think it was Mother Teresa who says we can't all do great things, but we can all do small things with great love. So, in our world, in our culture, we think to be successful, we got to take advantage of others to get ahead. We got to look out for ourselves, look out for number one. To which I think Jesus would say, no, to be successful, you got to be the servant of those that you work with. Even those who work for you, you've got to be their servant. Sometimes I think we think that great people have all the answers. They know it all. They know the exact path forward. I think Jesus would say, actually, great people know that they know very little, but they have a desire to learn all the time. We think that people that achieve great things tell others to do what they need them to do, to help others to do their bidding. I think Jesus says, no, people who achieve great things listen, and they value the ideas of others. We think great people are all about themselves, the big I, or the big U at the top of the organizational chart. To which Jesus, I think, would say, no, great people know we're in this together. We're better together than we are individually. Great leaders tell people what to do and how to do it. That's how you get things done. No, I think Jesus would say, great leaders ask their team what they can do for them, how they can loan themselves to the team to help them succeed, not the leader succeed. Great people know the way to success. They know how to win, which Jesus would say, no, that's not it. Great people ask questions like, what do you think? What's your opinion? What do you think we should do? Great leaders think, you work for me. Jesus says, no. Great leaders know that they are there to help you succeed, to be your best. You see, I think what Jesus is teaching us is great is not about you. Great is about how you serve other people. By asking the question, the simple question, what can I do to help you? And then the second part of that is give yourself 24 hours and then ask yourself, have I done what I was asked to do in question 1? So I think there is the recipe that Jesus says, here's what it means to be great. Great comes in service to one another. All right? So next week, we're going to continue this, and we're going to look at light in the world. We are called to be light on a hill. We're going to talk about that, how great leads to light, and how it helps people in the world understand what it means to follow Jesus. All right? So with that, I'm going to dismiss us. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to be dismissed. Holy Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you for revealing yourself to us. Thank you for preserving these words in Mark and helping us understand what it truly means to be great. And even though it's hard for us to think about greatness in terms of service, we know, I know beyond any shadow of a doubt that is true. I've seen it. And God, I pray that you'll take what we've talked about here today. I pray that you'll let it seep into our minds and seep into our hearts. And God, that we will start putting this into action by asking others, what can I do to help? And then actually following through on that. Father, I pray that you will give us wisdom and courage. Wisdom to know what to do and when to do it, and then the courage to actually take the steps to do it. These things I ask in the matchless name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Guys, have a great afternoon. See you next week.